And welcome back to the Invention Licensing Show. I'm your host, David Fido, and I'm here to help you license your product. Today, we're gonna go into the terrible advice that I never followed. So to jump right into it, the terrible advice that I never followed. And I guarantee you 100% there will be terrible advice that you get through your inventing journey that you should not follow, but you don't know what it is necessarily. I mean, you have to be able to decipher what is good and what is bad. And that is a very difficult thing when you're getting started, right? And so this is terrible advice, and that's why I wanted to share it, right? You have to know, or you have to differentiate. And so if I tell you what my terrible advice was, then you might be able to see that and say, yep, that's what David was talking about. And so the terrible advice that I got was not to follow a certain project. And it was a project that I was working on. It was, and I think it's right, maybe not. I don't know if you can see it back there, but it's sitting on my shelf. It's now a licensed product. And so the terrible advice of that product was when I got started working on it, I had put together marketing material and I had verbally told, friends and family about the product. And every single one of them, literally 100% of the people that I told were like, that's a terrible idea. That won't work. And so I sat there and was like, in my head, it all worked. And when I tell people, they're like, that's terrible, that's bad. And they didn't get what I was trying to accomplish. I wasn't communicating it necessarily in the best way. And that's what actually made it really terrible advice, because a lot of inventors think that they're being very clear communicating and telling people about their innovation, and they get reactions that are not necessarily in line with the actual product, but in just the way that they're communicating it. And that's where the problem lies, is inventors talk about or show people. My first marketing material of this product was bad. I look back and I say, man, that is bad marketing material. But at the time I was like, this makes sense to me. And it made sense to me only. That was the problem. And so once I started working on it and I showed people sell sheets, they're like, yeah, that's a bad idea, and I wouldn't do anything with it. But I kept working on it. And the reason I kept working on it, and the way that it made me be able to realize I can differentiate between terrible advice, is I understood the value that it would give the end customer. And when I understood the value it would give to the end customer, I knew that there was a way to figure out how to bring it to market. And the comments or advice that I was getting was misdirected. It's because the people that saw it didn't necessarily know or understand what I saw. And that's hard to differentiate, because a lot of inventors inside our heads have these pictures of, grand things happening with our products, but we don't necessarily know how it's going to get there. And when I had the vision for this product, I could see, like, this thing makes sense in all bars and restaurants across the country because it did this. And what it did was it saved bars and restaurants money. And that was very important. At the time, I worked in bars and restaurants, so I understood that very deeply, that money was a huge driver in that business on how to add to their bottom line. And so as I developed the product more, as I built actual real prototypes, and I shot video of it and I showed people the actual video of it, that's when people were like, wow, this is a great idea. I would pursue this. And it wasn't just, 5-6 months ago, they thought it was an absolutely terrible idea. And the idea had never changed. The idea was the exact same thing. It was just the way that I was communicating it. And so I can't say that it was truly terrible advice. It was just misdirected advice, because the people saying that it's a bad idea didn't understand the full extent of the product and how it impacted the end customer. But once I was able to boil it down into a communicatable fashion, then people were like, yes, that is a great idea. And so if I would have took what they said and said, yeah, they're right, this is a terrible idea, I wouldn't have licensed the product. And if I wouldn't have licensed that product, the minimum guarantees in that product replaced my previous salary, got me out of the day job, and kind of launched me into more of a full-time inventing career. And so it was the terrible advice that I never followed, and if I had followed, my life would be completely different. And so when you are taking advice or hearing advice, you need to understand where it's coming from and what they have it based off of. And once you know and understand that, you can take it as reality, right? If you're pitching your product and it's a demonstration of how it works and you feel it's true and clear to what the actual benefit is to a potential licensee who's able and willing to license your product, and they email you and say, this is not going to work because of X, Y, and Z, you can't blow that off, because that is exactly product related to the way that it's being demonstrated and works. And they have more knowledge in the industry typically than an inventor, based off of manufacturing, distribution, what people are buying. And so you have to take that advice. But if you show it to, siblings, family members, relatives, friends, whoever it is, and they think it's a bad idea, well, it's not necessarily valid advice, because they're not willing to write you a paycheck. So take advice from those that are willing and able to write you a paycheck for your innovation and that are in those industries, and take friends and family, relatives, whoever it is, their advice. Don't necessarily take their advice for exactly what they're saying. What they were saying to me early on in that process is they don't get it. Even though they were saying it's a terrible idea, it was more so they were saying, I don't get it. And so be careful, be mindful of the advice that you're receiving through your inventing journey. I hope you enjoyed that episode of License Your Invention. As you know, I'm always here to help you license your product. If you did get anything out of it, give me a thumbs up or subscribe now. The next episode is Shaking Hands with Presidents. I'll see you on the next episode.